Welcome, everyone. First, I hope everyone is healthy and safe and doing what they need to stay that way. My name is Andrea Ray, and I have the pleasure to serve as the President CEO at the Chamber. And on behalf of our board and staff, welcome to our SMART Southside Mitigation and Recovery Task Force webinar on advocacy. Thank you so much to our sponsor, South King Media. Scott and Teresa Schaefer have been tireless advocates for our community as a small business themselves. They are dedicated to helping other small businesses grow, as well as keeping our community connected and informed. Scott is broadcasting this webinar live on Facebook so that even more people are able to watch with us and ask questions. Thank you, Scott. SMART has presented over 14 webinars on topics from how to access funding, such as the EIDL and PPP, to updates on our hospitality sector. And we have lots of even future upcoming topics, such as de-escalation and career transition. So if you're able to join us through our Zoom platform, that's the best experience you can get, and you can register on our website, seattlesouthsidechamber.com, as well as watch all of our past webinars. We know providing opportunities to share information and connect will make our community stronger and ready for recovery. And we hope you can join us for more of these opportunities. And if you or your company is able to help donate or sponsor our work so that we can continue to provide this opportunity to our community. And now, for those of you who are joining us on Facebook, welcome. If you have questions for our panelists, please just type those into the comments section on the Facebook Live broadcast. Scott, our amazing media partner, will get those to us. If you are joining us through Zoom, you can go ahead and put those comments in the Q&A or in the chat, and we'll have lots of time to answer questions at the end of the presentation. We have three amazing presenters today and subject matter experts on advocacy, and we'll hear first from Carolyn Logue. Carolyn Logue is the owner of CA Logue Public Affairs, a legislative and political consulting firm based in Olympia, Washington. With over 30 years of lobbying experience, Logue works on behalf of clients such as independent grocers, libraries, online public schools, healthcare providers, HVAC and hearth product businesses, chambers of commerce such as ours, and other groups, providing a vast wealth of knowledge to help these groups successfully navigate the legislative process. Prior to starting her own firm, Carolyn served as the voice for the state's Small Business Association, NFIB, at the state capitol and in the media here in Washington State for 15 years. Prior to NFIB, Logue spent 4 years as the political affairs manager for the Washington Association of Realtors, where she managed one of the state's largest political action committees. Logue also worked in market research, running focus groups and providing analysis. She has a bachelor's degree in communications from the University of Washington and lives in Olympia. Carolyn, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's good to be here, and it's a lot of fun to actually be talking to people about how to engage with their government rather than focusing on all the different issues out there, which can get a little depressing. But I think right now, what we're finding out is that this is the time to really look at how do I engage with my government? How do I make sure that I am talking to legislators, that I am making sure that my elected officials at all levels, local, state, and federal, are hearing what I have to say, and that I'm actually participating in the government. It's one of the advantages of the United States and our system of government is the fact that we do have built-in abilities for you to participate. You do not need to be afraid. You can walk right up to these people. In fact, you could actually be one of these people if you want to. So it actually is an amazing system that we have. It works best when it's participatory. And I believe strongly it works best when you participate in the process itself. Standing outside and yelling only goes so far. Voting, calling your legislators, calling your congressmen, talking to their staff, helping, getting involved in looking at what the bills are and what needs to be in the laws, actually assisting when it comes to public hearings, providing your testimony, providing letters and emails. All of that is what is needed to make sure that our democracy and our system of government is representing everybody that lives in this country, not just the vocal few. You want to make sure you're actually in there participating and making sure it works. So I sort of put together a little kind of funny, tongue-in-cheek slide presentation to sort of introduce everyone as to how you go about involving yourself in government, that you don't have to be afraid, and some of the different things that you can do to be involved. So Andrea, if you want to start the slides. So one of the things that this came up to me, I think my children were teenagers, and I realized as I was putting together this presentation, and my big thing is always that, you know, real people can be political too. It's not just us lobbyists. It's not just people who get elected. It's not those who think they're part of the process. It's everyone. And I thought, you know, occasionally I'm prone to lecture my children, and so I thought, and I tend to use parental cliches a lot. So I thought, well, let's see if we can turn those into a guide to political success. So next slide, Andrea. So I started thinking about some things. And the number one thing that everyone needs to realize is every legislator, every congressperson is a normal human being. I haven't met an alien yet. I guess they could be hiding it based on if I watch some movies, that could be the case. But the reality is they're probably all human. They were probably all born just like you were. And they do put their pants on one leg at a time. Do not be afraid. Know who represents you. Know who their administrative assistant is. Be that person's friend. When they live in your district, at least they're supposed to. They need to know what their district's about. So when they're in district, reach out, call them up, say you want to talk with them. You can talk to them on the phone. You can talk to them via Zoom. You can talk to them in person, of course, depending on where we are in coronavirus. But the reality is get to know them and contact them when they're in Olympia or even on the federal level in Washington, D.C. Especially if they're in, the state legislative level, which I'm kind of focusing on right now. If they're in Olympia and they hear from you, then they know you really care. But it's kind of good to get to know them in district and get to know them and make sure they're hearing from you when they're in Olympia. Do not be afraid. They are people just like you. And I will just emphasize, you know more about what you do than they do. Next slide. The next one, of course, is because I said so, that's why. That's actually really not the best way to approach your legislators. You do want to have your data. You don't want to just have anecdotes. Anecdotes tell your story, but having something beyond that. So if you're talking about your business and you're talking about, let's say, taxes, and how those, really have some data on how those taxes impact you. How does it impact your ability to hire a new employee if your unemployment insurance and your workers' compensation taxes go up? The story is, I'm not going to be able to hire employees if you do this. The data is how much that actually costs your business. It's not hard. It doesn't have to be a lot. You don't have to be a scientist. It's what you have that backs up what you're trying to say. Do it briefly, do it concisely, and if you can write something down and hand it to them and provide them links for further research, that's good, but really try to get the information right in front of them in a way they can see it. If you don't have an answer, make sure you go find out right away. Don't try to guess. You want to be telling them the actual truth and you want it to be backed up. And then don't assume they're going to, if you put a link on, it's good to have those, but don't assume they're going to go to the website. Don't hide pertinent information behind a website. Links should be for data if they want to know more, but the information you want them to know should be right up there in front and easy for them to read. And no matter what they say to you, no matter where they come from, no matter what, and I think we saw this with 2 congressmen this week, be professional and nice even if you disagree. You will get nowhere if you're yelling at them, being angry, or anything. So if you're shaking your finger out and saying, because I said so, that's not going to get you anywhere. Really provide the why, and don't underestimate the emotion of your business and what it means to you. Next slide. Honesty is the best policy. I always used to do this with my kids. I had a couple issues with them. Always tell the truth. Do not think you won't be found out. You will be, especially in the small world that exists around politics and legislators. Make sure, I think I left a word out, make sure you talk to them in a comfortable area. There's these long rumors of lobbyists chasing legislators into bathrooms. I think it probably actually happened. But the reality is if you're catching them, if you're catching them in a bathroom or catching them, at a public restroom, or even if they're having dinner with their family, you don't talk to them about your issue then. You make sure it's someplace comfortable where you can really get their attention and engage. And the one thing in this, I think people get confused about this when they think about politics, they think about campaigns and money. Don't engage ever in a conversation where there's money offered in exchange for their position or vote on an issue. That is illegal. If they try to do it to you, it's illegal for them to do it. It's unethical, and it just shouldn't be done. You are a person in their district. They are representing you. It doesn't matter if you have money or not. They need to hear what you have to say. And if it's the right decision and the right vote, they need to do that, regardless of how much money's in the system. The money just gets them elected. When it actually comes to the issues and where the votes are, it should be about what's the right decision, and make sure you're contributing to that. Next slide. Don't assume, otherwise you make out of you and me. That is an old adage. And I think it really works here. Don't assume you know where the legislator is on the issue. Do your research, make sure you know what's going on, and also, what are your opponents going to say? Think about what the opponents are going to say. You're talking about a tax increase. Somebody's going to say, well, we need this tax increase to pay for this program over here. You need to say, well, but if I can't hire more people, then that's going to possibly increase the number of people who need that program, and that doesn't seem to be right. Find those types of things. What will your opponent say? And then rebut that, and be respectful of your opponent's position. I haven't met anyone in this process yet who really wants to hurt someone else. They have valid reasons for their positions. It's your job to rebut and to bring your own data forward, not to judge them. So really be more about what you need and what works for you, recognizing you may have to compromise, but at the same time knowing where your opponents are coming from, so you can have a really good discussion with the legislator about all the different points involved in that issue. Next slide. Money doesn't go on trees, and this is where the money comes in. And I'm not talking about campaign money. So a lot of times, you're in there and you're saying, we need to get a new road, we need to do this. And the Southside Chambers of Commerce had to deal with this. We wanted the big 509-167 transportation project. Money does not grow on trees. It has to come from somewhere. So if you are asking for something that costs money, make sure you have a basic understanding. And I put a link on here that I think Andrea can send this out to everybody, of the budget and where money comes from and what's going on, different budgets, there's operating trends. Kind of know that stuff. Know that it will cost money, and know that you're going to be asked. And kind of, if you have an idea, know how much it's going to cost to do this. Look it up, or work with the people who want to do this that you're working with. Know how much this is needed. If new taxes or fees are needed, make sure you know what that is, and you have some ideas, and you're giving them. We had to have really tough conversations in the Southside Chambers about what might be needed and the best way to fund a big project that has a lot of economic benefit. And don't advocate saying, oh, well, we should cut this program to do this. Really sell the merits of what you want first. If there is a need to get money from somewhere, that discussion should come organically in the conversations with the legislator as they talk to others about how to get that money. It's really, you could come in and say, well, if we just took this money from over here, we could do this. That is an argument, but at the same time, it's better if you've sold your program first, and then that conversation comes later. Next slide. This is my favorite. This is the politics side. And this is what all of you as business owners, even if you think you shouldn't, you really should be paying a lot of attention to politics. And it is really I brought you into this world, and I can take you out. Politics is not bad. This is how we get our lawmakers. This is how we get our democracy. This is how they get where they are. You don't want it to be controlled by just a few people. You want it to be controlled by the masses. You want to be involved in voting. You want to know who's running. You want to know where they are on the issues. And you want to make a decision based on what's best for you and your various hats you have in your life, including your business hat. You want to make good decisions about this. And so you need to make sure you're not saying, well, I want nothing to do with politics. I have an old friend who always said, you can stay out of politics. Eventually politics does run your business. And so you really probably need to pay attention. It's the government's the not so silent partner. I think there's a lot of cliches about it, but the reality is don't ignore it. You need to know what's being said. Keep it local, really focus. The more local you are, everybody likes to focus on the president's race. Oh, Trump versus Biden, woo! Guess who's going to have more impact on your business? Who's running in your legislative district? Who's running for governor? Who's running for your local races? They are going to have a more direct daily impact on your business than anyone. Know who those people are. Keep most of your politics local, have a local identity. Be ready to help somebody. Evaluate the candidates. Talk to them. Don't assume, you're reading their ad and you know where they are. Really ask them if you've got specific issues, like where are you on small business and the taxes it takes and labor costs and that type of thing. Do you know what this means? Ask them about that. Ask them where they come from. Be ready to help, and then be ready to help get them there. That is where the money comes in. This is where you go in and you say, I really want this person to represent me, so therefore I'm going to help them in whatever way I can. Writing a check is voting's the number one. Writing a check is easy. Getting other people to also understand where this person comes from and know them and vote for them is perfect. And help get people involved. Volunteer in their campaign. Contribute to the campaign if you have the ability to do that. Try to ignore party affiliations. Once again, don't assume because they're Republican they're going to help you and they're Democrat they're not, or vice versa. Try to ignore that, get to know the candidate, talk to them, especially at the local level. I think you'll find that most people have a very diverse level of knowledge and opinions, and that transcend whatever their party platform is. And then go to the town hall meetings and really make sure that you're making yourself known and that they see you as a resource. And I think what you'll find is you get a lot more, you get people who really represent you, and you'll find out other people that can work with you and try to make sure you can get people elected. Next slide. And until you've walked a mile in their shoes. This is our plea, and I think Patrick and Rose and all of us, it would be so easy if every legislator was a small business owner or had run a small business at some point in their life. They would understand profit margins. They would understand what it means to hire a person. They would understand what it means to mortgage your house and try to explain that to your spouse in order to keep your business going. They would understand why when the government says you're shut down, there's not like a pot of money sitting there that you get to drain off of, and the PPP loans are nice, but they will only go so far. And that reality is you probably don't want to be too dependent on government anyway, because it seems to be short-lived. So you just kind of look and so the big thing is it's all that easy stuff, getting somebody else elected. What about yourself? Take a look. Would I like to do this? Do I think I would be good? It's a lot of work. But if you're a pretty active person, you're active in your chambers, you're active in Kiwanis and Rotary and all those other groups, and you find yourself being somebody who really has a lot of opinions, you're voting, you're writing your checks, you're getting involved, take a look at whether or not this is something you want to do. Talk to the sitting legislators. Talk to people you know, because the number one thing you want to do if you do want to run for office, you don't just make an announcement and run for office. You want to build a base before you do it. You want your committee. You want to make sure other people are helping you out because that will help your success. But boy, if you're a small business owner and you want to change things and you think you can do this, we encourage you to get involved. I think you'll find A, it's not as easy as maybe you thought it was, but B, it would certainly help with decision making and with understanding about where small business comes from when you're looking at people who serve in the legislature and when the decisions are being made. I think we're on the last slide now. That was it. So yeah, ignore that contacting me stuff. You can. So anyhow, I just want to kind of give this, it's not rocket science. It's actually pretty easy. It doesn't mean you have to go to protests. You don't have to be involved. You don't have to worry about tear gas. That we have great mechanisms for business owners to get their voices heard, to join associations, to find groups of like-minded people to help them. And you need to take advantage of all of that, because I think then we'll have, the more voices there are out there, the louder they get. But the reality is the best voices are the ones who are engaging in a way that legislators and the policymakers can actually understand what they should be doing with laws and regulations to make them work. So with that, I will pass it off. I think next is Patrick, Andrea, right?
That's correct. And again, thank you so much, Carolyn, for just helping to kind of demystify what is advocacy as we start more of the conversation. And again, we're so fortunate to have 3 speakers today with us that are active in that advocacy space for small business. And our next speaker is Patrick Connor. He's been the Washington State Director for the NFIB since August of 2009. For more than 75 years, NFIB has been advocating on behalf of America's small and independent business owners, both in Washington, D.C. and in all 50 state capitals. NFIB is a nonprofit, nonpartisan, and member-driven. And since its founding in 1943, NFIB has been exclusively dedicated to small and independent businesses and remains so today. As state director, Patrick represents the organization and its members to the legislature and state agencies. He also oversees its Washington state political and campaign operations. Patrick, we're so thrilled that you're able to be here with us today. Share a few thoughts. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Andrea. And I'd take just a minute to thank everybody who's participating with us today. Activism is terribly important. Even if you don't think that you have a chance to influence what happens in government, the truth is you really do. And certainly government has a big, big influence on you and your business, whether we like it or not. Kind of hard to follow Carolyn, as always. She covered a whole lot of territory there, and I think took some of the best talking points. But when it comes to being engaged in politics, like they say, all politics is local. It is important for you as a business owner, as a citizen, to do what you can to stay up to date on what's happening locally with you. But more importantly, it's important for you as an expert in your small business, as an expert about your community, to reach out and talk to those people who are supposed to be representing you at City Hall, at the state capitol, and certainly in the capital of Washington, D.C. And the secret really is that lawmakers at every level really do want to hear from you. They're not trying to make decisions in a vacuum. They're not trying just to do what the lobbyists or their hired hands tell them to do. They're trying to make the best decisions they can with the information that's available to them. And quite frankly, very, very, very few of them have any understanding at all of what it takes to run a small business or to keep your small business going. Certainly in a situation like we're in now with this pandemic that has businesses closed or operating at less than capacity, has our customers staying home, or maybe if we're lucky ordering online, we're in uncharted territory here. Lawmakers really don't know what the answer is. You do. You've got the best sense of what it would take for your business to continue to be successful, for you to be able to continue to have employees on the payroll, for them to be earning wages and salaries to take care of themselves and their families. Share that experience with your local elected officials. As Carolyn mentioned, sometimes it's as easy as sending an email or making a phone call. The information about how to contact your local city councilors, your state legislators, even members of Congress is easy to get to. If you don't know where to start to look, I'm sure that Andrea and the good folks at the Seattle Southside Chamber can point you in the right direction. If you're a member of a group like NFIB, the Retail Association, or other trade groups, we're always happy to help our members get connected with the lawmakers representing them at all levels of government. Your story is unique, your experience is unique. You have got a wealth of information, and it would be a shame for you to keep that to yourself. Whether you're talking to elected officials, or I think Rose is going to delve into this a little deeper, talking to agency officials, you're helping to inform the people who are making decisions that will impact how your business operates now and well into the future. Unfortunately, too often small business owners are buried with the myriad of things that they've got to do in order to keep the doors open, and don't think they have the time or don't take the time to reach out and connect with local officials. Right now is a great time to do it. As everybody knows, we're in the midst of campaign season, and while all the attention might be on the White House, the really important races, as Carolyn mentioned, are happening in city halls and state legislatures, and yes, Congress and the presidential race as well. But now is a good time to reach out. Typically, candidates would be going door to door right now. They would be knocking at your front door. They'd be dropping off flyers. They would be introducing themselves and asking for the vote. It's tough to do that under these kinds of circumstances. So they are scrambling, looking for novel ways to try and reach out. And a lot of that is going to be electronically, TV, radio ads, Facebook, or other kinds of social media posts. They're seeking engagement, and they're seeking some help in trying to get their message out. So now is really a good time for you as a small business owner to make a connection with one or more of the candidates running for offices that you care most about. Give them a call, send them an email, schedule some time for a phone call, schedule some time for a Zoom call if you'd like. Find out what their schedule is like. A lot of them are putting on town halls through things like Zoom, like we're doing today, or doing campaign events. And they're certainly looking to find ways to get out and get their message out to folks like you. They care what you think. It's incumbent upon you then to do your part by reaching out and sharing your experiences with them. Tell them what you're concerned about. Tell them what they could do when they're elected to make your life a little bit easier, to help you and your business make it out of this terrible pandemic situation, to get to a point where maybe you can add a new employee or open a new facility. Because otherwise, all they're going to hear is from the other side, who think that every small business owner out there is a millionaire with tons of money hidden under the mattress, able to pay whatever new and novel tax they come up with in order to fund somebody else's priority. So do your best to make sure that you are the priority with your elected officials. Whether you simply establish a little bit of a rapport with them through periodic phone calls, emails, get to know them, let them get to know you, you'll become a resource. One of the things we don't talk about enough is that legislators really are looking for good information and want to hear from you, as I've said before. That even is the case during legislative sessions. While they will certainly be happy to meet with lobbyists like Carolyn and Rose and me and others, nothing is more important than hearing from folks back home. When a big issue comes up, they're going to take a phone call from you. They're going to read an email from you, as long as it's not one of those form emails that we're all too easy to send and to sign on to. Make a personal communication, a personal effort to communicate with your lawmakers, and you will see a difference. They will come to rely upon you as an expert. When they have a question about how a policy that they're considering may impact you, they're likely to reach back out if you've established that rapport. And again, during a campaign is a good way to do it, especially in those places where you don't have an incumbent. If you've got an open seat or you've got a challenger who's got a good shot at taking out one of those incumbents, now's a good time to get involved in their campaigns. Carolyn mentioned writing a check, setting up a meeting, even putting up a yard sign. Do what you can to make those initial connections, because they can pay off so much more in the future. When lawmakers at every level know that somebody back in their hometown cares and is paying attention, they're more likely to listen. I think Rose is going to dig in a little bit to how we can affect the agencies, but I will tell you from my experience that it's not just the legislators who are making all the decisions. They may pass a law, but it will be the agencies that actually put the rules into effect, that fine-tune those laws. And typically, it's the rules that have the most impact on you and your operations. And much like lawmakers, agency officials too often try to reach out, try to find people with experience in the area that they're regulating in order to tailor rules that make sense and will apply in a way that gets the intended job done. We have had good success at NFIB being able to put our members in front of key agency officials while they are coming up with rules. And I can tell you, it really does make a difference. Just a quick anecdote, we've got a couple of our leadership council members, much like your chamber board, I'm sure. But these two are in border communities, one near Idaho, another one near Oregon. So when the Department of Labor and Industries was looking at implementing some of the minimum wage and paid leave laws, they were soliciting public comment about how to structure the rules to best deal with employees that might be located in another state but work in Washington state. Not something that a lot of people are necessarily impacted by, but something that would have impacted a lot of our members in those border communities. We were able to get them together with several officials at the Department of Labor and Industries, sit down, explain their operations, how it works with them trying to manage employees in other states, what the other state requirements are. And in the end, we were able to get a rule that actually included examples from our members and that was structured in a way that made sense and didn't expose our members to liability in more than one state for the way that they were running their operations with employees that might work in Washington, Oregon, or Idaho. While I won't get into too much more because I don't want to steal Rose's thunder on talking about ways to better impact the rulemaking process, keep in mind that it's not just elected officials who can impact your operations. It's also the full-time officials that work for our various state agencies, city agencies, and to some extent, obviously, federal agencies as well. It can be tough trying to track the rulemaking process, which is why it's important for you to be a member of the Southside Chamber, of your local trade association, or other statewide business associations. It's our job to try and make sure that you're informed about what's going on, how you can get involved, how to submit your comments. But the bottom line with agencies or with elected officials is there is an opportunity for you to impact what happens, whether it's at City Hall, in Olympia, the state capitol, or even in Washington, D.C. But it's incumbent upon you to do your part to engage and to work with your legislators and share your expertise with them. And with that, I'd certainly like to hand it over to Rose, because I'm curious to hear your questions and see how maybe we can help you become a better advocate for your small business. Thanks very much, Andrea.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Patrick. Again, really appreciate that insight. Our next speaker is Rose Gunderson, the Vice President of Operations and Retail Services with the Washington Retail Association. She oversees a high-performing team that provides a claims and risk management assessment for the members and works closely with the association's government affairs team on policies that impact retailers. Definitely no shortage of that lately, Rose. Her intimate knowledge of government regulations and challenges small business face make her an invaluable resource to support regulatory compliance. Rose has enjoyed success as an entrepreneur in both the private and nonprofit sectors, as well as in policy research and advocacy. Rose has over 25 years in insurance, banking, healthcare, and 3 years as labor and industries small business liaison manager, where I first had the privilege of meeting Rose before she did join the Washington Retail Association. Her education includes a BA in Business Administration from the University of Washington, an Executive Juris Doctor degree from Concord Law School. She has been recognized by policymakers and civic organizations for her advocacy work to combat human trafficking, and while she was the Small Business Liaison at Labor and Industries. Outside of work, Rose is a board director of Washington Trafficking Prevention, a nonprofit she co-founded to combat human trafficking. You will also find her mountain biking with her husband whenever, wherever possible. Rose, it's my pleasure to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Andrea. It's so great to reconnect with you again through this opportunity. I love working with chambers. As Patrick said, there are a lot of ways that small business could impact legislation and also rulemaking. And let me explain a little bit about rulemaking. What it is a process agencies do to create rules that are based on statutes passed by the legislature. There are so many ways that they could impact you, and I'm going to share a few examples. I only had 3.5 years at state government. It was pretty eye-opening because most of my background have been and as a business owner, entrepreneurs, and really working with people on the ground. Currently, there are 2 rules that are going on, one with ESD, one with L&I. I'll just use that as an example and why it's so important to you. With COVID, unemployment is rampant, and supposedly the legislature has passed a bill early this year that employers can ask for benefit charge relief because these unemployment of the employees are not their fault. And so there's some kind of benefit relief that is possible, but they have to make that request. Now, ESD is still in the process of finalizing that rule, and the request needs to be made according to the statute by September. So there's only maybe a 2 months window of time. But many employers may not even know about that asking for relief. And if they don't know this process, if they're not aware of it, they may miss that window of time to make that benefit request relief. But right now that it's being promulgated in that process, so it's important to stay engaged so that maybe you don't get out of that potential loop to ask for the benefit relief. So that's one example. And the other example is more interesting with L&I and may not impact every employer, but it's about the bloodborne pathogen vaccination that is required, that employers are required to provide if there's that kind of risk exposure at their place of work for their employees. with this, L&I promulgated a CR 105. What that means is it's a quick one. They call it emergency, just to make sure it's aligning with the RCW or statute. I read it, and this is what they start. A couple new items they put into the rule that to me is really beyond normal expectation. It's beyond the expressed language of the RCWs. They added this saying employers must make sure that the vaccination that's provided is according to the recommendations of the United States Public Health Service. Employers wouldn't know that. How are they supposed to know that? Why does L&I all of a sudden put that mandate to make that the employer's responsibility? Another one that is new and different is employers must make sure that all laboratory tests are conducted by a laboratory licensed by the state of clinical laboratory improvement amendments. I don't even know what that term is. Most people don't. So how are employers supposed to make sure the lab is of this credential? So these are unreasonable, added mandate that's not based on the RCW, and employers need to know. And why is this a speedy rulemaking? Is just beyond me. So these are just examples of how important it is to be engaged and as part of the process. And as Patrick mentioned, it's so important to engage with your chambers and trade associations, because these rules come out every day. And if you include all the agencies that promulgate rules that affect small businesses, you'd be inundated. So it's important to stay engaged with your chamber. They'll tell you which ones are more important. Your trade association will really filter it for you to let you know, and they will speak on your behalf. But it's so important that you tell your story. You let your trade association know. You work with them together. You get the information. When I was the small business liaison, I did speaking to many trade associations and CPA groups and all that. And a lot of times they get upset with me about, why is this rule there? And this is not fair or whatever. And every time I say, that is why you belong to your trade association. That is why you belong to your chamber, because that's how you get these things changed. Without it, you can't blame me, as a state government employee, because I couldn't do anything, because the advocacy is on them and on you. So on my slide, the link there, I provided several links to these key agencies that issue, these are the big 3 tax agencies, and they have rulemakings constantly. And if you can't access the link, just Google and go, Google the agency name and then put in rulemaking, and you will be able to likely find where to sign up for the rulemaking notice that you will receive. And so next slide. So when I was the small business liaison, this is my role. I know that sometimes it's not just rulemaking, it's how a rule affects you and how it impacts you, and how you could navigate and speak up for yourself. Or maybe I call sometimes these government process makes people get stuck in mud. And when you're stuck in mud and you don't know who to go to with each agency, you access the small business liaison team. And I was on that team. I was the small business liaison with labor and industries. And I'll give you some examples of what that stuck in mud looks like, and how contacting these liaisons could really help you. So one employer called me, is a logging firm. One of her employees got a tooth knocked out from a machinery and has been waiting for the tooth to get replaced, get a crown for weeks. It's a front tooth. And the claim was stuck in mud because the claim adjudicator was new, and go through the process of making sure that they need to get the provider, a personal provider of the prior dentist of this worker to make sure that there's no prior pre-existing condition. Well, in this case, you lose a tooth. It doesn't matter whether you have pre-existing condition. You lost a tooth at work, you need to get replaced. So the employer called, and within a couple of days, within one day, that claim was approved. And that's how sometimes you get that stuck in mud situation, and this liaison could help you navigate it through and get it done faster. Another example was really interesting. It was a condominium homeowners association. They needed to just replace the carpet in the elevator. And it should be very cheap, maybe $250 including labor, right? It turned out it was going to cost them probably several $1,000s. And this is why. The rule says that anytime anything is done in an elevator, it needs to get a permit from L&I, and that process needs to have an elevator technician be there while anything is being done. So elevator technician is very expensive, even though the permit is not very expensive. So they were very upset, and the HOA came to me and said, can this be more simple and cheaper, or maybe we'll just put a rug on it and cover up the really when elevator, even if a rug is old, people could get tripped, and there may be other hazards. Anyways, so fortunately, L&I had a new elevator chief who was willing to be flexible. I know the prior chief wouldn't even amend anything. I went to her and really worked with her, and she just said, it took a few weeks. She just said, I'm going to give this special exception for this type of situation. And these are called guidance or policies underneath the rulemaking. So we were able to let get through, and so this homeowners association didn't have to fork out several $1,000s. Instead, they just paid for the replacement of the rug. So that's another example. And another example is we need your voices to let agencies know how the process is like for you. For example, if you're going through an audit, or you're going through a collection process. I know, in my opinion, a lot of times state agencies, employees are not very user-friendly. This is an example. You submit documents they requested. They receive it. They never tell you, they don't send you an acknowledgement. They don't tell you that they got it. And you may be wondering, did it fall into the ocean and nobody knows? When is my audit going to be done? Do they really, I asked for a payment plan. Did they really get my email? It's extremely frustrating, especially by the time they finish the audit, they come to you and say, or they may ask you for more documentations according to their timeline, but not according to your timeline. You may be on vacation. You may be, and then you miss a lot of opportunities. Anyways, that is so important. It's so important that businesses, chambers work together to go to the government, go to their director and say, this process is not acceptable, of not acknowledging, it's courtesy, not acknowledging that you receive my document when an audit could, it's such a critical process. So that's another example. I know, Patrick, I really appreciate your Small Business Bill of Rights have made a lot of requests related to these uncourteous behaviors of government employees. And really, I like your bill. When I was in there, I was saying, yay, 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 but it's not being heard by legislators very well. But you've had, you've been inching some successes, so that's good. So these are just examples. It's the rulemaking. It's the process of how people have to deal with employees in the process of dealing with them that really need advocacy as well. So that is and the small business liaison is your contact to get to the right person a lot quicker. Just this last couple of weeks, one of our members got a notice from Department of License saying they were in violation. There was a complaint filed against them in violation of the stay-at-home order, but has no specification of what it is whatsoever. They try to call the contact line that's listed, and nobody ever get back to them. So I contacted on their behalf to the small business liaison. Within 24 hours, I was able to get them to connect to the right person to get all the facts. So this is another example of why it's important to help to contact the small business liaison to navigate through these processes. So next slide. Minority business owners. In Washington State, the estimate minority population is about 25%. That's a quarter of the population. And being a minority myself, I'm also an FOB, freshman board, came from a different country. I speak two different languages and understand the cultural divide. Sometimes it's not that it's just different. And minorities in general are being underrepresented in most mainstream chambers and in lobbying efforts. And it's not intentional, it's just been the way it is. I think what I really recommend every chamber and every lobbying efforts, and I've been trying to advocate even within my association, say we need to do intentional outreach to minority businesses. And if you're in the audience, if you know of other minority business owners, really do the work to bring them to the table, to help them understand it, because their voices will be heard, sorry to say this, better than the mainstreams. And that's that's a huge missed opportunity. It's a missing piece for the business sector, especially. So I really want to encourage that intentional outreach effort to be more inclusive and plan for it. I'll just share this. I was attending a chambers event which had a speaker from the Korean consulate speaking a speech, and some Korean businesses were there, but there was no planned outreach to connect them, to reach them. They were just pretty much left to themselves, to their own table. It was a missed opportunity to bring them and get them into the chamber and to show that inclusiveness. So that's just an example of how it could be a missed opportunity. I'll tell you, I grew up in Hong Kong, and there's this saying that for Chinese, going to the government or going to an official, you will get spanked every time. That is a cultural background of why minorities don't really think about going to advocate for themselves, because the culture tells them that you will get spanked, you'll get hurt, you won't be heard. And besides the language barrier, that is in their culture, that they fear politicians, they fear government officials, because they're gonna retaliate against you. And that's not in American democracy, but we need to help them overcome that. One example I want to share is during this legislative session, I reached out to 2 Korean business owners for the predictive scheduling legislation, and they were willing to come, and I really appreciated the predictive scheduling would harm these grocery owners and hotel owners. It would really harm them tremendously because they not only have to give 2 weeks of schedule ahead of time, but they'll be penalized if they have to change anything. So a catering event that gets canceled, they cannot change it. They have to still pay the employee, even though the catering event was canceled maybe 2 weeks. Like, now governor says no more wedding reception. So if this piece of legislation was in place, every owner of that catering event will lose money, right? They have to still pay their workers. So they came and testified, and it was the only minority that represents businesses. The legislators really listened to them. The legislator who really was a supporter of this bill afterward came up and shook hands with these two business owners. So you can see how the potential of their voice being amplified a little bit more is important, because they rarely show up to testify. So that's the end of my 3 slides.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Rose. Again, really appreciate, especially your focus on being, intentional with inclusion here in South King County. We have more minority and refugee business owners than anywhere else in the county, and so that is a huge focus of our chamber, is to be inclusive with our equity and diversity practices, and that absolutely means intentional and focused outreach. So I appreciate you hitting that topic, which is so pertinent to us here in our community in South King County. Just wanted to give everyone a reminder, please use the webinar Q&A feature to submit questions for our panelists. Carolyn, I'm going to be asking you to help facilitate kind of our panel Q&A here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can see us all here. And again, I guess our first question that's coming through is just with so much information coming at us and the kind of roar of politics being so constant, what or how do you talk to individuals and small business owners in particular that might feel complacent or disenfranchised? And, the temptation is really just, especially now, just to turn it off and disengage. How or what do you say to encourage people to still stay focused?
I'll start, and I'll let Patrick and Rose. I always used to joke that one of the things that made me a small business lobbyist was I was a cheerleader for a losing football team in high school. So I think the big thing is once again, it is overwhelming. There's so much. And I think that's legislators don't understand that either. And a state agency, they're all focused in the state agencies on their little piece. And they're like, oh, well, unemployment. They don't realize you've got unemployment, workers' compensation, you've got taxes, you've got employees. And if you have employees, it's like having another set of kids sometimes. They have issues, you have to deal with them. And, it gets very stressful. So my advice is to pick one thing. Pick one thing that you think will have the most impact and that you feel the most comfortable talking about to legislators and to other people. So let's say you are looking at this unemployment insurance situation, and let's say you're saying, wait a second, we shouldn't have to ask for relief from benefit charges. There shouldn't be benefit charges on employers right now. We didn't shut ourselves down. We didn't close ourselves down. If you feel passionate about that and you feel like you can explain it and you can show how these unemployment insurance increases impact your business, if you can show how it impacts hiring, pick that one thing and say, okay, this is what I'm going to talk to my legislators about. It may be hard to pick that one thing, but I think it's really important to just find something you feel like you know the most about and are the most comfortable talking about. And that can be your introduction to getting to see how you can affect change. If you try to do it all, that's what you have Patrick and Rose and me and all the associations and the chambers for, is to work on all of it. And we're overwhelmed right now. So as a small business owner, my advice is Find one thing that you think is most important to you that you feel comfortable talking about, and practice, use that to start yourself off. Patrick, or do you have anything to add? And then Rose?
I think you hit the nail on the head there, Carolyn. Especially with social media and the 24-hour news cycle, everything just feels like it's coming at you out of a fire hydrant or a fire hose. It does help to try and specialize on the one or two things that are most important to you and to your business. Everybody's an expert on how they run their business. Certainly they know how a change in a tax law or a labor policy is going to affect them. It's easier then to be able to focus that information and share it with a policymaker, whether it's an elected official or an agency official, because you know the ins and outs as a business owner of what that change is going to mean. As you mentioned, the chambers, NFIB, retail, other groups, yes, it is our job to try and keep our eyes on the horizon, look at everything that's coming at us and our members. And I try and really focus information to the members who are going to be most impacted by a particular rulemaking or legislative issue. Not everybody is going to care about L&I's new changes to the telecommunications code, but I've got a couple of telecom folks that are very active in our association, so I make sure that when we get the announcement like we did yesterday about changes to that particular rule, that I send it to them so they know that when they see an email from me, that it's relevant to them and something that they can be aware of and then take action if they need to. So I think it's incumbent upon many of us as association leaders to try and really help to filter, or to be that filter for our members, to try and direct information to them, and to do it in a way that breaks off easier to digest pieces rather than trying to overwhelm them or add to the volume of information that's coming at them. So again, as experts in our own small businesses, pick the one or two things that are most meaningful and important to you, and share that experience and share your insight with those who are making decisions that will impact you.
And I'll speak a little different aspect. If you are trying to recruit other small businesses to advocate together, think of some successes that you could possibly talk about. And for example, the predictive scheduling, all the businesses work together really hard to at least stall it right now. And that's a success in and of itself. But I think it's important to think of some, really building hope. Right now, businesses need hope, and, identify some successes and to bring hope, to inspire people to work together. I came from Hong Kong. I grew up in Hong Kong. Right now, Hong Kong is losing the democracy or the freedom of speech that I've always enjoyed. But at least in America, we still have that hope. So use it and before you lose it, hopefully.
And I'll provide just a real quick example. So I work with a group of hearth patio, basically the wood stove fireplace dealers. And there was a proposal put in front of the State Building Code Council that we got wind of. They're like, oh, we're not gonna be able to do anything. I said, oh, yes, we can. And the one thing we did that probably had the most impact is I said, I want everyone to put on your vests and your hats and your shirts that have the name of your business. And we went into the State Building Code Council and sat in the room. We had our proposal and what we wanted to change, but we had a group of us sitting in the room on that one issue. And, signed up to testify. Some of them didn't want to, but it was just that show of force. I don't think the State Building Code Council had seen that many people on an issue in some time, and it made them pay attention, and we were able to have good talks at that point about what the language should actually say. It doesn't take a lot. Sometimes it's just kind of getting your friends together and showing up at the meeting if they have one.
I appreciate that. And I think, Carolyn, you touched on this a little bit at the beginning of your presentation too, is that, politicians are people, right? And they work for us, right? We are the people, and that they want to hear from us,
Yes.
they want our stories, they do not want to do their work, inside a vacuum. And so when we are able to engage and to reach out, whether that's individually, or collectively, again, it helps. It makes a better process, right? Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely. Perfect. All right. So lots of questions coming in from people that are watching. So Patrick, you touched on this a little bit, just kind of talking about social media, and certainly social media plays a huge role, in our lives today, but also in business and politics. And so maybe we could just how do we use social media for advocacy, in business, in politics? Are there things that we should be doing, maybe things that we shouldn't be doing? Thoughts on social media, business, politics, and advocacy?
Well, that's a nice little question. Yes, social media certainly has an important role to play in helping to influence public policy. But I have found that there is a bit of a digital and generational divide in the legislature, just like there is, I think, in some of our families. Um, Younger members of the legislature tend to be more likely to be more present on social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter in particular, and more responsive to interacting with individuals who try and reach out to them on social media. But I think a lot of the same rules that apply to traditional lobbying, traditional activism also apply to social media. You can have 100 people all putting up the same post in that sort of cookie cutter fashion. Um, and it probably is not going to get as much traction as a communication of whatever sort, a phone call, an email, a Twitter post, or Facebook post that is customized, tailored to the recipient, that shares particular information from the sender's own perspective. Certainly there's a role for mass communications, blast emails, group texts, or everybody liking a post. But again, it's that personal touch that has the most influence. But I would say that when your trade association, your chamber group puts something out there, if it's something that you agree with, believe in, it's a good thing for you to share it. Put it out there for other people who might not be part of your business pod to be able to see what you're concerned about. But take the time also to put a thoughtful comment on there. Sometimes a thumbs up or a heart is enough, or a thumbs down. But if you can add to the dialogue by tailoring a comment to your particular situation, I think that is more likely to get more engagement, not just for the policymakers that might be looking at it, but also for the other folks that are following that particular thread. So I think there are opportunities for us to better utilize social media. A lot of what we do tends to be more general kinds of communications, updates for our members that we put out through social media channels. Sometimes it's hard to know if those are terribly effective or not, because you might scroll past it and not comment. So we hope that we're throwing out good content, but don't always get much feedback. And I think the same thing happens with legislators and with candidates. They'll post information. They want you to know what they're working on, where they're going to be, what they're up to. And so I think they also find it a little bit reaffirming when somebody takes the time to comment, to do something more than just a thumbs up or a thumbs down or a heart or whatever, depending on the platform you're using. But that engagement, that personalization is going to go a long way to helping you stand out from the crowd and helping you to get your message to your intended audience a little bit better. So certainly I would say pay attention to the social media posts that your chamber, your trade groups put out there. Participate in them, share them, like them, comment if you can. Figure out who your local lawmakers are, see if they have got Twitter, Facebook, or other social media accounts. Follow them, see what they're up to, and when appropriate, make your voice heard through social media as well. Every opportunity for you to interact helps to build that relationship, and at the end of the day, it's the relationship that really makes the most difference in trying to influence policy.
I would say social media also, I mean, it helps you gather sort of your like-minded group to help you out. But if you're really trying to get someone's attention directly, do not underestimate the old-fashioned phone call. And I actually, if somebody has a fax machine, send them a fax, because no one gets faxes, and they'll be like, oh, what the heck is this? It's really weird some people still have that old-fashioned fax machine sitting in their office, and if a fax comes through, they're always going to look at it.
It's a good tip, Carolyn. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I think some of it is it's never underestimate, kind of that power of the unexpected communication tool, right? And we, use all the tools, right? Yeah, absolutely. Perfect. So here's a question coming in again. We know the Governor Inslee announced new changes and restrictions to the Safe Start phased-in approach to reopening for businesses, and that these new restrictions, especially to bars and restaurants, are pretty restrictive. And so, what have you been hearing, from maybe some of your members about what's happening with the restrictions? How are businesses and small businesses, responding to some of these changes? And I know once maybe Patrick and Rose and Carolyn, you give your insights. I know I can share a few insights from our chamber members as well.
Rose, maybe you should start with this, because between you and Patrick, I may start with some of the small retail.
Yeah, the one from yesterday didn't really touch on retail, but all along the way, so the essential and non-essential has created two worlds. Some retailers are just growing and thriving, and then some are not. We give it a term called transfer of wealth from the small businesses to even bigger businesses. So that's why this is a really crucial time for small businesses to speak up, because most small businesses have been left out and disadvantaged because of the shutdown. And the other thing is that we hear from our members, especially from retailers, they constantly, I'm not against the hospitality, they constantly compare, okay, what's the scientific data behind the 25% and 30%? Why are restaurants able to get to 75% when we are still supposedly up to 30%? And so there are a lot of, even though the governor has been saying, it's based on science, but the percentage and this and that, just there's no science behind it. So it's really due to advocacy. And, we've been working really closely with the governor's office and LNI and all these, but it really depends on the members' input. And for example, right now, LNI is issuing a new updated FAQ on face covering, and they're asking for input. It's so important that we get engaged together with our members and get small businesses involved in that as well. So that's mine.
I think our members are growing increasingly frustrated. I think they were frustrated to begin with, and things seem to be getting worse instead of better. There continues to be some skepticism about the rules the governor is promulgating. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of input that is being collected, accepted. Quite frankly, I think the small business owners really need to do a better job of stepping up and contacting the governor's office and letting him know how his decisions are impacting their operations, how it's impacting their ability to make a living for themselves, to put people to work, to support those families, and to support activities in their community. We continue to hear the state is suffering loss of revenue. That is nothing compared to the loss of revenue that small businesses are seeing. And again, that frustration, I think, is peaked more given that our small businesses are being told that we need to shut down regardless of whether or not we are able to serve our clientele in a safe, responsible way. And it is really, really challenging to try and keep a stiff upper lip about that when you see these big stores that have been operating throughout the pandemic, able to bring in hundreds or thousands of customers in a day or a week, and being considered essential, being able to basically take up the lion's share of the commerce that's going on in many communities. And these small businesses are having to sit by and watch as their customers go to the big box store down the street. I think it is imperative that small business owners get on the phone and start calling the governor's office and explaining in no uncertain terms what his decisions are doing to us. Small businesses are responsible for half the jobs in this country, but the way we're going, the half that are going to be unemployed are overwhelmingly going to be former employees of small business owners. So I think we're at a point where we can no longer sit quietly by. We can no longer smile behind our masks. Instead, we need to use this downtime to contact our legislators and particularly the governor's office and let him know how our individual businesses are able to responsibly, safely serve our customers, and that we can do so the same way, if not far better, than the big box stores down the street that are able to continue to be open while we're not.
I think also it's important to add on. I had an interesting conversation with a small business owner, a small retailer over in a very small town in Eastern Washington. I walked in with my mask on. She walked down and said, "Do you care if I don't wear a mask?" And I said, "You have to." And I started to get the argument back about the ADA, and no, I don't. And I said, "No." I said, "You have to. Right now, that face mask requirement is going to be more impactful on you as an employer and as the business owner than it is on me as your customer." And I said, "You don't know who I am." So you should not have said that. And the reality, I think, for small business in this whole thing, I think they need to do exactly what Patrick was saying. And I understand the frustrations. But at the same time, we need to transcend above the politics of whether a mask is good or not. And the small business owners, the one thing that I do know about small businesses, they know their communities and they know what's going on. And I understand the frustration of you're the only, we were the only two people in that store. But the reality is we've got to knock the virus back. I don't think the virus is very political, and we've got to stop making it political and listen to the public health people. If a mask might work, then let's give it a try and make it work and do what Patrick was saying and prove to them that small business owners are going to do this and that our 1 and 2 people coming into the stores are safe and we're not going to be the source of the spread of the virus. If you need an example, 2 symptomatic COVID positive hairdressers working with 140 clients, no transmission in that close. So it doesn't have to be the perfect mask, but some sort of nice face covering. Show the government we're willing to do this. Show that we understand that this isn't about politics, and that and then get in there and call them and say, we're willing to do this, but you got to stop shutting us down.
Appreciate that. Yeah, thanks, Carolyn. And we're definitely getting a lot of those questions, too, here, at our chamber. We participated with Seattle Metro Chamber, King County, One Redmond, and Amazon, and have distributed, almost 4 million face masks to local businesses, right? So we have Safe Start kits that are available, at our chamber office that small businesses can come and pick up. It has, cloth masks, disposable masks, and hand sanitizer. And some of the questions that we got in, today for our panel, are questions related to, again, can small businesses, require their employees to wear face masks, right? The answer is yes, they have to. Can businesses refuse service, from customers who don't wear face masks? Yes.
You can refuse it if they're not wearing pants or a mask.
Right.
Right. If they walk in with no pants on, you could make them leave.
Right. No, absolutely. And, my father was a small business owner. He owned and operated an independent pharmacy for, almost 50 years. And, I think about, all of the policy and regulation changes that he went through from when he first, opened his first pharmacy, to when, he sold the pharmacy, and, talk about, massive amounts, of change. And so we talk a lot about just, how nimble and resilient our small businesses have to be. And I know it's hard and it is frustrating because, we're asking them to be even more nimble and resilient than they have to be, with everything that's happening. But again, would just encourage, small businesses, as you said, Patrick, to, engage with your chamber, engage with your trade association. We can, help communicate. We can help filter. We can provide, resources for everything from, reopening guidelines to staying open, mitigation, advocacy, please, do lean on us. I've been doing this work now for 7 years, economic development, small business, resources. And it's hilarious because my husband just now, since we, were in lockdown working from home, together, he finally said like, oh, I now finally understand what you do, because he, is hearing my, 15 Zoom meetings, every day. He's like, you're an information laundering service, right? Small businesses are so busy doing the work of running their small business. They don't have time to sort and filter all of the information that's coming at them. So when we are able, as professionals and advocates for small business, to sort and and distill, for them, that's huge. But again, it doesn't just stop with us. We need that engagement to provide that higher level of advocacy, and communication to our lawmakers and our policymakers, so we can ensure we have the best policies in place that are as equitable as possible.
And that advocacy is important also because the governor has basically said businesses are the enforcer of the mask mandate on the populace. That's a difficult position to put business owners, particularly small business owners in small, who want to be part of their community and respectful of their community. And I've gotten a kick out of some of the signs that are showing up. It's not just I'm asking you as a mask. And it gets back to parental, how do you talk to your kids? No, you can't have 3 friends in your car when you just got your driver's license. It's not because it's my fault. The governor said, the legislature said you can't do that. Seriously, make sure that you've got good communication and signs up in your business explaining why you're requiring a mask, and ask for your customers' help in getting through this so your business can stay open. I think the best signs I've seen are the ones that say, I need you to wear a mask so I can keep my business open. I think there's a response to that is far more positive, even from some of the true anti-maskers. That, I appreciate that you don't want to do this, but can you just put something over your face so that I don't suffer a potential fine, and the fines have happened, so that our other customers that are in the store don't harass you, and so that we can keep our business open and not have to shut down again. And I think the fact that we've seen things go backwards a little bit, that message hopefully will carry over with a lot of people and resonate a lot more. And so that's the ability. That's, people don't underestimate. If you're a business owner in a community, you have the ability to talk one-on-one. It's like me talking to that business owner. We came up with some ideas of things she could do instead of having to have a tight mask on her face that at least show she's trying. And I think to the extent that everybody's at least trying, and you can socially distance and do all that, let's do this. I think we can get through this much faster. But yeah, call the governor and say, don't shut us down. We will do this. And then put really good communication with your customers. Really important to communicate with your customers about what it means to shut down your business. So
another thing I would suggest is it's good to build, as a local business, people want to support local businesses. And, I do a lot of fundraising for the nonprofit work that I've done. And who do I get money from? I don't get from big business. I get it from local small business owners who sponsor events, they are local. So next, maybe we can suggest this to all businesses. When the Girl Scouts, when the local baseball team, when the high school come and ask for sponsorship, ask them to sign something for you. Maybe we could have this campaign and format a template that, Girl Scout troop, blah, 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 support small business. And please, legislator, listen to them, or something like that. Because we need to really demonstrate the importance of small business, how we support local efforts, not just tax. Without these local businesses, a lot of these little sponsorships that baseball team, soccer team get will not happen. So build allies with these outfits that come get money from you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So we just have two more questions, and then we'll just kind of, wrap up with some final thoughts here. So this one, again, just kind of has to do with special sessions. I think, we talked about how there's a deficit. The state's looking at a deficit. We've heard, we are going into special session. We're not going into special session. Any thoughts on special session?
I'll start. I was on a meeting last night, heard from two of the high leaders in the legislature. There won't be any special session until at least the November elections, and probably not after that. So the thought that we're going into a special session is less and less likely every day that marches by.
And we're also hearing that some upcoming committee assemblies that would normally take place in November, December will not happen in person. Somehow they're going to be virtual hearings. So there's also a good chance that the beginning of session could also somehow be done virtually. We haven't heard the details yet about what that might look like. But the interesting thing is this could be a whole new opportunity for small business owners and others to use technology and find new innovative ways to connect with legislators because they may not all be in Olympia. So if you've taken the time to establish a relationship with your local legislator, they may be home and trying to legislate by Zoom or something else, at least early in the session. So Carolyn's right. We don't see the prospect of there being a special session before November. It's unlikely to happen between November and January. But more and more, these gatherings are going to be done through technology platforms like this. And so we as association leaders need to be thoughtful in how we are able to try and get our members to engage and how to make sure that the message from small business gets to key legislators through some different means of communication. So it's going to be an interesting few months.
Perfect, great. And then the last one, there's a couple questions that are just related to reopening and enforcement. And I would just again direct those questions. We have at the chamber a reopening toolkit that businesses can download that just kind of again filters all of that information about masks, about temperature checks, about signage, about logs, all those kinds of things. Those can just be found at SeattleSouthsideChamber.com, or you can give us a call here 206-575-1633. We'll happy to help direct you to those resources. And again, this might just be a final question for you, Rose, because again, there's so much new information. You mentioned that Ellen and I was going to come up with a new FAQ. Do we have any kind of idea when that might be available?
So as of today, they told me it's going to be, and I could share it with you if you guys want to give some input. I'll email you right after this. They're going to start really wordsmithing it a little bit more. They gave us one version to look at and asking for input. And they're, for example, they're giving an option for people who can't wear masks. Face shield, you can put a cloth covering all around the edges and all that. But one of our members said, hey, we have, auto repairs and, could get caught in machines and it's not safe. And so that's something we're going to get back to Ellen and I. It's something I don't think about. Most retailers don't deal with it, but we do have auto shops as members. So we need people to give input on that.
Perfect, great. Any final thoughts on, advocacy and the importance of being involved, being engaged?
I think from my perspective, especially when, Rose was talking about minority businesses, don't be afraid. It's easy to listen to somebody say you don't have a voice. The reality is you do. And that person who's telling you don't have a voice is the one who's wrong and is the one who's trying to keep your voice down. So step in there and say, I do have a voice. I have as much right as anyone else in this community to be here, to own this business. I'm trying to do something for the community by owning that business. It is how I provide my job. I'm trying to make sure I don't have to be dependent on government programs. Make sure that you're letting people know that, and make sure that you're in there talking to the people who are trying to make decisions for you. And talk to your employees, and be honest, and really let people know what's going on. I think you'll find that a lot more people are responsive than you think.
And I just add, don't underestimate your ability to influence public policy. Again, whether it's at City Hall, the state capitol, or even in Congress, legislators, agency officials want to hear from you. They need to hear from you. You're the expert about how your business operates. Share that expertise. Whether or not they agree with you is not essentially the point, because it's building that relationship so that those people making decisions about you get to know you, get to understand that you know what you're talking about, and that when you take the time to reach out and communicate with them, it's important. Your expertise will be insightful to them, and ultimately they will want you to continue to communicate with them. They will seek out that expertise. They want you to be engaged. So while you have hundreds of things to do in any given day, just trying to keep your head above water these days, trying to run your business, take a few moments, at least once a week if you can, and make a point of reaching out and sharing your expertise with the elected officials, because whether you like it or not, government decisions are going to impact you. The least you can do is have a say in how those decisions are made.
And also the power of being organized by being part of a chamber, trade association. That is so important to multiply your voice, to get information. It's worth the membership fee.
Thank you so much, Rose. Appreciate that. I know our founding principle is stronger together, right? And it's true, right? The more that we are united, the harder it is to divide us, and the more that we can accomplish together. So again, thank you so much to Carolyn, to Patrick, and to Rose for being here with us. Really appreciate it. Thank you to everyone who joined us through our Zoom webinar, and then also, watching live on Facebook. Again, we'll have the full webinar recorded live. It can be viewed later on our website if there is something that you wanted to refer back to at SeattleSouthsideChamber.com. And then again, if you've ever contemplated joining your local Chamber of Commerce or your trade association, now is definitely the time. Chambers and trade associations across the country have been and will continue to work tirelessly on your behalf and on the behalf of members and small businesses during this pandemic. We are here for our business community, and we strive every day to bring you the best value that we possibly can, whether it be informational webinars like this, virtual networking opportunities, connecting members to other referrals and services that they might need. Again, we are here for you and our community. So again, stay safe, wear your mask, and we will see you soon. Thank you so much. Everyone have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jan, Patrick, and Carolyn, and Andrea. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Thanks. Bye.
See you later.
Thank you.